Commander Park Ji-ho stood on the bridge of the human exploration ship Sunrise and watched the planet grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442c looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, and green continents spread between them like scattered islands. White clouds moved slowly across the planet's face. "Commander, we are getting strange readings from the surface," said Dr. Kim Minji from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life forms. Her fingers moved quickly over her controls as she studied the data coming from their sensors. "What kind of strange readings?" Park Ji-ho asked. He had been exploring space for 15 years, and he knew that strange readings usually meant something important. "There are cities down there, but no one is living in them. The buildings are intact, but all the life signs are gone. It's like everyone just packed up and left." Kim Minji frowned at her screen. "Wait, there's something else. I'm detecting faint life signs underground, very faint." Lieutenant Cho Yunji looked up from her communication station. "Sir, I'm picking up an automated signal from the planet's orbit. It's broadcasting on all standard galactic frequencies." "Put it through the speakers," Park Ji-ho ordered. A mechanical voice filled the bridge, speaking in the common galactic language that all spacefaring species used. "Warning, this is a restricted zone. Quarantine protocols are in effect. Predator species offspring present. Do not interfere. Natural selection protocol is active. Repeat, do not interfere." The bridge fell silent. Park Ji-ho had heard about natural selection protocols before, but he had never encountered one personally. The Galactic Council used these protocols when they wanted nature to take its course without any outside help. "Sir, should we move to the next system?" asked Navigation Officer Yoon Tai-woo. "The message seems pretty clear." Park Ji-ho stared at the planet. Something about this situation bothered him. "Dr. Kim, tell me more about those life signs you detected." Kim Minji's fingers danced over her controls again. "They're coming from underground cave systems. The readings are very weak, which usually means the life forms are either very small or very sick. Maybe both. How many are we talking about?" "Hard to say exactly, but I estimate several hundred individual life signs." Chief Medical Officer Kang So-jin spoke up from her station. "Commander, if these are living beings and they're sick, they might need medical attention." "The warning message said they're predator offspring," Cho Yonji reminded them. "Predator species are usually dangerous. That's why the Galactic Council has these protocols." Park Ji-ho walked to the front of the bridge and stared at the planet. He thought about the automated message and the weak life signs Kim Minji had detected. Several hundred living beings underground, sick or dying. "Prepare a shuttle," he said. "Finally, we're going down to investigate." "Sir, with respect, the Galactic Council's message was very clear," Cho Yinji said. "We could face serious consequences if we interfere." "I didn't say we were going to interfere. I said we were going to investigate." "There's a difference." Park Ji-ho turned to face his crew. "We need to know what we're dealing with before we make any decisions." 2 hours later, Park Ji-ho led a small team down to the planet's surface. Kim Minji came with them to study any alien life they might find. Kang Soo-jin joined them in case medical attention was needed. Engineer Lee Dong-yoon came along to help with any technical problems they might encounter. The shuttle landed near the entrance to one of the larger cave systems. As they stepped outside, Park Ji-ho was struck by how quiet everything was. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, even the wind seemed muffled. "The air is breathable," Kim Minji reported, checking her scanner. "Oxygen levels are good for humans." They walked toward the cave entrance. The opening was large enough for their shuttle to fly through, and strange symbols were carved into the rock around it. Lee Dong-yoon shined his light on the symbols. Never seen writing like this before," he said. "The universal translator isn't picking it up either," Kim Minji added. "This must be from a species we haven't encountered yet." As they entered the cave, their lights revealed a tunnel that sloped downward into darkness. The walls were smooth, as if they had been carved by skilled workers. Every few meters, more symbols appeared on the walls. "Life sign readings are getting stronger," Kim Minji whispered. We're getting close to something. They walked deeper into the cave system. After 20 minutes, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Park Ji-ho's breath caught in his throat as their lights revealed what lay inside. Scattered across the cave floor were hundreds of small creatures. They looked like they might grow up to be fierce predators someday, but right now they were clearly young and helpless. They had sleek bodies covered in dark fur, large eyes that reflected their lights, and small claws on their feet and hands. Most of them were lying. Still. Too still. Oh no, Kang Soo-jin breathed. She knelt next to the nearest creature and gently touched its neck, checking for a pulse. This one is still alive, but barely. They're starving. Kim Minji moved carefully among the creatures, her scanner beeping softly. Commander, these are juveniles. They can't be more than a few months old. They've been abandoned here. How long ago? Park Ji-ho asked. Based on their condition, I'd say at least 2 weeks. Maybe longer. Lee Dong-yoon found containers scattered around the chamber. They were empty now, but they smelled like they had once contained food. Someone was feeding them, but then they stopped. One of the young creatures near Kang Soo-jin lifted its head weakly. Its large eyes looked directly at her, and it made a small sound that reminded Park Ji-ho of a kitten crying for its mother. They're babies, Kang Soo-jin said softly. Just babies. Kim Minji stood up and faced Park Ji-ho. Commander, I'm reading elevated stress hormones in all of them. They're terrified and starving. At this rate, most of them will be dead within days. Park Ji-ho looked around the chamber. Hundreds of young creatures abandoned in a dark cave, slowly dying while the galaxy's automated systems broadcast warnings. To stay away, natural selection protocol. Let nature take its course, but these weren't wild animals dying in a natural disaster. These were children who had been fed and cared for until someone made a decision to leave them behind. Sir, Cho. Yunji's voice crackled through their communication devices. I'm monitoring galactic channels from the ship. Word is spreading about human ships in this system. We're getting some attention we might not want. Park Ji-ho touched his communicator. Understood. We'll be back to the ship soon. He looked at his team. Kim Minji was kneeling next to one of the stronger creatures, trying to coax it to drink some water. Kang Soo-jin was checking the vital signs of several others. Lee Dong-yoon was examining the empty food containers, probably trying to figure out what the creatures had been eating. Pack up, Park Ji-ho said quietly. We're heading back to the ship. As they gathered their equipment, one of the young creatures crawled closer to Kim Minji. It was weak, but it seemed to want to stay near her. She looked up at Park Ji-ho with pleading eyes. Commander, we can't just leave them here. The galactic protocols are clear, Dr. Kim. We're not supposed to interfere. But they're children. They're dying. Park Ji-ho felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Follow galactic law and let hundreds of young beings die, or risk his ship and crew to save creatures that might grow up to be dangerous predators. As they walked back through the tunnel toward their shuttle, Park Ji-ho couldn't stop thinking about those large, frightened eyes looking up at them in the darkness. The galaxy had made its choice about these creatures. Now humanity had to make theirs. Back aboard the Sunrise, Commander Park Ji-ho called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. The entire senior crew gathered around the oval table, their faces serious as they watched the recordings from the cave on the central display screen. What you're seeing are the Valkyrie young, said Dr. Kim Minji as the images showed the weak creatures lying on the cave floor. I've been researching them in the galactic database since we returned to the ship. Lieutenant Cho Yunji shifted uncomfortably in her chair. What did you find out about them? Kim Minji touched her tablet and new images appeared on the screen. These showed adult Valkyrie in full size. The creatures were massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall with powerful muscles and razor-sharp claws. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, but also with something that looked dangerous. Adult Valkyrie are among the most feared predators in known space, Kim Minji continued. They're incredibly fast, strong, and smart. Most species consider them natural-born killers. Chief Medical Officer Kang Soo-jin leaned forward. But those babies in the cave didn't look dangerous at all. That's because they're not dangerous yet, said Navigation Officer Yun Tai-woo. The key word is yet, Kim Min-ji nodded. According to galactic records, young Valkyrie are helpless for their first year of life. They depend completely on adults for food and protection. But once they mature, they become apex predators. Communications Officer Shin Ye-ji, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I've been monitoring galactic communication channels. Word about our presence here is spreading fast. Some species are already sending messages asking what we're doing in a restricted zone. Park Ji-ho rubbed his forehead. He had been hoping they could investigate quietly, but space was never that simple. What kind of messages? Most are just curious, but a few are warnings. The Altarian Federation sent a formal notice reminding us about galactic protocols. The Zenthari Empire wants to know if we plan to violate the natural selection protocol. Engineer Lee Dong-yoon pulled up more data on his tablet. I've been looking into these natural selection protocols. They're not just suggestions, Commander. They're actual galactic law. Any species that violates them can face serious consequences. What kind of consequences? Asked Kang Soo-jin. Trade sanctions, diplomatic isolation, even military action in extreme cases, Lee Dong-yoon replied. The galaxy takes these protocols very seriously. Cho Yun-ji stood up and began pacing around the room. Commander, I have to say this clearly. If we interfere with those creatures, we could be putting all of humanity at risk. Earth depends on galactic trade relationships. Our colonies need those supply lines. So we should just let children die because it might hurt our economy. Kang Soo-jin's voice was sharp with anger. They're not human children, Cho Yun-ji replied. They're predator offspring. The galaxy has these protocols for good reasons. What reasons? Kim Min-ji challenged. I've been reading the historical records. Do you know why these protocols exist? The room fell silent. Kim Min-ji continued. The Valkyrie homeworld suffered a massive volcanic eruption 3 weeks ago. The adult population had to evacuate immediately to save themselves. They had to choose between certain death for everyone or abandoning their young to possible death. They chose to save themselves, Yun Tai-woo said quietly. And the galaxy supported that choice, Kim Min-ji added. The Galactic Council immediately declared the planet a restricted zone and activated the natural selection protocol. They made it illegal for anyone to help those children. Park Ji-ho had been listening quietly, but now he spoke. Dr. Kim, in your research, did you find any examples of Valkyrie young being rescued and raised by other species? No, Commander. This situation is unprecedented. No one has ever tried to save abandoned Valkyrie young before. Shin Ye-ji looked up from her communication station. Sir, I'm getting more messages. The Valkyrie government itself has sent a statement. They're saying that any species that interferes with their abandoned young will be considered hostile. They're threatening us for trying to help their own children? Kang Soo-jin asked in disbelief. It's complicated, Kim Min-ji explained. Valkyrie culture is based on strength and survival. In their society, being abandoned is seen as a test. If the young can't survive on their own, they're considered weak and unworthy of the species. Lee Dong-yoon shook his head. That's harsh, even for predators. But it's their culture, Cho Yun-ji pointed out. Who are we to interfere with another species' way of life? We interfere when that way of life involves letting children die. Kang Soo-jin said firmly. The room erupted in heated discussion. Some crew members supported following galactic law, while others argued for saving the young creatures. Park Ji-ho listened to both sides, feeling the weight of the decision growing heavier. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. I want to hear from everyone, one at a time. Tell me what you think we should do, Cho Yun-ji spoke first. Commander, I believe we should respect galactic law and leave this system immediately. The risks to humanity are too great, Lee Dong-yoon nodded. I agree with Lieutenant Cho. We have responsibilities to our own species first. Yun Tai-woo was next. I'm torn, but I think we have to follow the protocols. If we break galactic law, it could hurt humans everywhere. Shin Ye-ji looked uncomfortable. I keep thinking about those communications from the Valkyrie government. They clearly don't want our help. Maybe we should respect their wishes. Kang Soo-jin's voice was steady when she spoke. I took an oath to preserve life, all life. I can't stand by and watch children die, no matter what species they are. Kim Minji was the last to speak. Those creatures in the cave are sentient beings. They feel fear and pain just like we do. The fact that they might grow up to be predators doesn't make their lives worthless. Park Ji-ho stood up and walked to the large window that showed the planet below. Somewhere down there, hundreds of young beings were dying slowly in the darkness. Computer, show me the original message from the galactic beacon, he said. The mechanical voice filled the room again. Warning, this is a restricted zone. Quarantine protocols are in effect. Predator species offspring present. Do not interfere. Natural selection protocol is active. Repeat, do not interfere. Park Ji-ho turned back to his crew. That message assumes that letting those creatures die is natural selection. But what's natural about abandoning children? What's natural about making it illegal to help them? Sir, Cho Yunji said carefully, are you considering violating the protocol? Park Ji-ho was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his responsibilities as a commander, about the safety of his crew, about humanity's place in the galaxy. But he also thought about those large, frightened eyes looking up at them in the cave. I keep thinking about something, he said finally. The galaxy has rules about letting predator young die, but humanity has rules too. We don't abandon children, we never have. Commander, Yoon Tae-woo said, those aren't human children. No, they're not, Park Ji-ho agreed. But they're still children. And if we walk away from children who need help, what does that make us? He looked at each member of his crew in turn. The galaxy operates on survival of the fittest. The strong live, the weak die, and everyone accepts it as natural law. But humans have always been different. We take care of our weak. We help those who can't help themselves. It's what makes us human. Cho Yunji tried one more time. Sir, the consequences could be severe. For all of humanity, Park Ji-ho nodded. You're right. They could be, but sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price. The question is whether we're willing to pay it. He walked back to his chair but remained standing. I'm going to make this decision as your commander, but I want you all to understand something. We're not just representing ourselves down here. We're representing all of humanity. The choice we make will show the galaxy who we really are. The room was completely silent as Park Ji-ho made his choice. We're going to save them. Every single one we can? The silence stretched for several seconds before Kang So-jin smiled. Thank you, Commander. But Cho Yunji's expression was worried. Sir, I hope you know what you're doing. Park Ji-ho looked out at the planet one more time. So do I? Lieutenant, so do I. Within 6 hours of Commander Park Ji-ho's decision, the Sunrise transformed into a rescue ship. Every available crew member worked to prepare for the most challenging mission of their lives. Dr. Kim Minji had taken over the main lab and filled it with research about Valkyrie biology. She studied every piece of information in the galactic database, trying to understand what the young creatures needed to survive. Their digestive systems are completely different from ours, she explained to Chief Medical Officer Kang So-jin as they worked together. They need high-protein foods, but most of our supplies will make them sick. Kang So-jin looked at the chemical analysis on her screen. What about the emergency protein supplements we carry for long missions? I can modify those, but it will take time, and we'll need to be very careful about the amounts. Too much could poison them. Too little won't help them recover. In the engineering section, Lee Dong-yoon was converting 2 cargo bays into temporary living spaces for the rescued creatures. The work was harder than he had expected. The temperature has to be exactly right, he told his assistant, Engineer Park Min-ho. Too cold and they go into shock. Too warm and they overheat. What about the air mixture? Park Min-ho asked as he installed new ventilation systems. Dr. Kim says they need more humidity than we're used to, and the lighting has to be dim. Bright. Lights hurt their eyes. Meanwhile, Communications Officer Shin Ye-ji was monitoring galactic channels, and the news was not good. "Commander," she reported to Park Ji-ho on the bridge, "3 more species have sent formal complaints about our presence. Here, the Zenthari Empire is demanding an explanation. And sir, there's something else. What is it?" "A Galactic Council enforcement ship is heading this way. It will arrive in approximately 18 hours. Park Ji-ho felt his stomach tighten. Galactic Council enforcement ships were not sent to deliver warnings. They were sent to stop violations of galactic law by any means necessary. "How much time do we need for the rescue operation?" he asked. "Dr. Kim estimates 12 hours to prepare proper care facilities. Then another 6 hours to safely transport all the creatures from the caves to the ship. That cuts it very close." Navigation Officer Yoon Tae-woo looked up from his station. "Sir, we could leave now and avoid the enforcement ship entirely." Park Ji-ho considered the suggestion. "It would be the safe choice. But those creatures in the cave would be dead within days if no one helped them. We proceed with the rescue," he decided. "But we work faster." Down in the medical bay, Nurse Han Ji-woo was preparing medical supplies for creatures she had never seen before. She studied Kim Min-ji's notes carefully, trying to understand what kinds of injuries and illnesses to expect. "Most of them will be severely malnourished," she read aloud. "Dehydration is likely. Some may have infections from living in unsanitary conditions." She gathered 4 fluids, antibiotics that Dr. Kim had identified as safe for Valkyrie biology, and soft materials that could be used for bedding. Everything had to be ready before the first shuttle brought creatures up from the planet. Lieutenant Cho Yoon-ji had volunteered to lead the surface operations, despite her earlier objections to the mission. As she prepared her equipment, she spoke quietly with Park Ji-ho. "Commander, I still think this is dangerous, but if we're doing it, we're going to do it right." "I appreciate that, Lieutenant. I've been thinking about the logistics. We can't move all those creatures at once. We'll need multiple trips, and each trip increases our risk of being discovered by the enforcement ship." Park Ji-ho nodded. "Prioritize the weakest ones first, save who we can." The first shuttle mission launched 4 hours later. Cho Yoon-ji led a team that included Kim Min-ji, Kang Soo-jin, and 4 other crew members. They carried modified transport containers that Lee Dong-yoon had designed to safely move the young Valkyrie. When they reached the cave, the situation was worse than before. Several more creatures had died since their last visit, and the survivors were even weaker. "We need to work fast," Kang Soo-jin said as she knelt beside one of the creatures. It was barely breathing, its small body trembling with fever. Kim Min-ji moved carefully through the chamber, using her scanner to identify which creatures were strong enough to survive the journey to the ship. It was heartbreaking work. Many were too weak to move. "This one," she said, pointing to a small creature that lifted its head when she approached. "And this one. They still have fight in them." The young Valkyrie were terrified of the humans at first. They made small crying sounds and tried to hide behind rocks or curl up in balls. But hunger and weakness made them easier to handle than they might have been. Cho Yoon-ji surprised everyone by showing a gentle touch with the creatures. She spoke softly to them as she carefully lifted them into the transport containers. "It's okay, little one," she whispered to a creature that was shaking with fear. "We're here to help." The first shuttle trip brought 12 creatures back to the Sunrise. As soon as they arrived, the medical team went to work. Kang Soo-jin and her nurses started 4 fluids for the most dehydrated creatures, while Kim Min-ji began feeding the stronger ones small amounts of the modified protein supplement. The process was difficult. The creatures didn't understand that the humans were trying to help them. They struggled against the medical procedures and refused to eat unfamiliar food. "Try this," suggested Nurse Han Ji-woo. She had warmed the protein supplement to body temperature and added a sweet-smelling additive that Kim Min-ji thought might appeal to young Valkyrie. One of the stronger creatures sniffed the food cautiously, then began to eat. Soon others followed, and the humans felt their first moment of hope. But success brought new problems. As the creatures began to recover some strength, they became more active and harder to manage. They didn't understand why they were confined to the cargo bay, and they cried constantly for their missing parents. They're grieving, Kim Minji realized as she watched one small creature sitting alone in a corner, making soft wailing sounds. They know they've been abandoned. The second shuttle mission brought back 15 more creatures, including several that were critically ill. One died during transport, despite Kang Sojin's best efforts to save it. The medical team worked through the night, fighting to keep the others alive. Engineer Park Min-ho had installed speakers in the cargo bays and was experimenting with different sounds, trying to find something that would calm the frightened creatures. He discovered that low, rhythmic humming helped them relax. It probably reminds them of their mother's heartbeats, Kim Minji suggested. By the end of the second day, the humans had rescued 43 young Valkyrie. But there were still hundreds more in the caves, and time was running out. Commander, Shinyeji reported, the Galactic Council enforcement ship will arrive in 8 hours. And sir, I'm picking up another signal. A Valkyrie warship is also approaching this system. Park Ji-ho felt the pressure mounting. The enforcement ship was bad enough, but a Valkyrie warship could be much worse. Adult Valkyrie were known for their aggressive responses to perceived threats. How much longer do we need? He asked Kim Minji. At least 12 more hours to get all the creatures that might survive, she replied, maybe longer. Park Ji-ho looked at the tactical display showing the approaching ships. They had to make a choice, save some of the creatures and escape, or stay and risk everything to save them all. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures, he decided. We'll save who we can, but we won't sacrifice the crew. But even as he gave the order, Park Ji-ho couldn't stop thinking about the creatures still trapped in the caves below. Humanity had chosen to care instead of abandoning them, but would caring be enough to save them all? The next few hours would determine whether their compassion was strong enough to overcome the galaxy's indifference. 3 weeks had passed since the first rescue mission. The Sunrise was no longer just an exploration ship. It had become a floating nursery for 68 young Valkyrie who had survived the rescue operation. Dr. Kim Minji walked through the converted cargo bay that now served as the main living area for the creatures. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been frightened, dying beings were now active young animals that played, ate, and even seemed to laugh in their own way. "Good morning, little ones," she said softly as several of the creatures approached her. They had learned to recognize her voice and smell, and they no longer feared her presence. One creature in particular had formed a strong attachment to Kim Minji. She had started calling him Swift because of how quickly he moved despite his small size. Swift followed her everywhere and seemed to understand some of her words. "How are you feeling today, Swift?" she asked, kneeling down to examine him. He chirped happily and nuzzled against her hand. Chief Medical Officer Kang Soo-jin joined them, carrying a tray of the protein supplements that had become the creature's main food source. "His growth rate is amazing. He's gained 30% of his body weight in just 3 weeks. "They all have," Kim Minji replied. "I think Valkyrie young are designed to grow quickly when food is available. It's probably a survival mechanism." As they fed the creatures, Kim Minji noticed something new. Swift was making different sounds than usual. Instead of simple chirps and clicks, he was producing more complex patterns of noise. "Kang Soo-jin, listen to this," Kim Minji said. She spoke to Swift in a gentle tone, asking him how he was feeling. Swift responded with a series of sounds that almost seemed like he was trying to copy her speech patterns. "Is he trying to talk?" Kang Soo-jin asked in amazement. "I think he might be. Valkyrie are supposed to be highly intelligent. Maybe their young learn language faster than we thought." Kim Minji spent the next hour recording Swift's vocalizations and comparing them to human speech patterns. The results were surprising. Swift wasn't just making random noises. He was actually trying to communicate using sounds similar to human words. "Swift hungry," the creature said suddenly, the words unclear but recognizable. Both women stared at him in shock. "Did he just speak?" Kang Soo-jin whispered. "Swift hungry," the creature repeated. Looking directly at Kim Minji quickly brought him food, her hands shaking with excitement. Swift eat, she said clearly, pointing to the food. Swift eat, the creature repeated, then began to consume the protein supplement. Within hours, news of Swift's breakthrough had spread throughout the ship. Commander Park Ji-ho came to see for himself, accompanied by most of the senior staff. Show me, Park Ji-ho said. Kim Minji knelt beside Swift and spoke slowly. Swift, this is Commander Park. Can you say hello? Swift looked at Park Ji-ho with his large, intelligent eyes. Hello, he said, the words slightly slurred but clearly understandable. Park Ji-ho's expression changed completely. My God, they're not just animals, they're people. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Kim Minji said. Valkyrie young are capable of forming complex thoughts and emotions. They understand that they've been abandoned, and they remember being afraid and hungry. Communications Officer Shin Ye-ji, who had been monitoring galactic channels, looked troubled. Commander, this changes everything. If the galaxy finds out that Valkyrie young can speak and think like this, it will cause major problems. What do you mean? Park Ji-ho asked. The natural selection protocols are based on the assumption that predator young are just animals acting on instinct. If they're actually intelligent beings who can think and feel, then abandoning them becomes a very different moral issue. Over. The following days, more of the young Valkyrie began to attempt speech. They learned human words quickly and seemed eager to communicate with their rescuers. They expressed gratitude, asked questions, and even shared memories of their life before the abandonment. We had home, one of the creatures told Nurse Han Jae-woo during feeding time. Begun with warm places, then loud noises came. Earth shook. Parents said, run. Do you remember your parents? Han Jae-woo asked gently. Yes, they said come back for us, but no come back. We wait long time. These conversations revealed the depth of the trauma the young Valkyrie had experienced. They had trusted their parents to return for them, and when that didn't happen, they had slowly lost hope, but living with humans was healing that trauma. The creatures began to show affection for their caretakers, following them around the ship, and even trying to help with simple tasks. Swift had become particularly attached to Kim Minji. He learned new words every day and asked constant questions about human life and culture, why humans help us. He asked one day as Kim Minji was teaching him to read simple words on a computer screen. Because it's the right thing to do, Kim Minji replied. Humans believe that all children deserve care and protection. Even predator children? Kim Minji paused, struck by the wisdom of the question. Yes, Swift, even predator children. What someone might become doesn't change what they are now. Swift was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Galaxy not think like humans. No, Kim Minji agreed. A galaxy doesn't think like humans. Humans better, Swift said firmly. Meanwhile, the political situation was becoming more complicated. The Galactic Council enforcement ship had arrived, and was demanding that the humans surrender the Valkyrie young immediately. The Valkyrie government was also sending increasingly aggressive messages, but something unexpected was happening in Valkyrie space. Word of the human rescue had spread among the Valkyrie population, and it was causing internal conflict. Commander, Shin Ye-ji reported, I'm intercepting Valkyrie communications. There's significant debate in their government about the human actions. Some are calling for military action, but others are questioning why humans would risk so much to save Valkyrie young. What kind of questioning? Park Ji-ho asked. Some Valkyrie are starting to ask whether abandoning their young was really necessary. There are reports of protests on several Valkyrie worlds. Parents who lost children in the evacuation are demanding answers. Dr. Kim Minji looked up from her work with Swift. Commander, I think we're witnessing something unprecedented. The galaxy has always accepted that predator species abandon their weak. But we've shown that those weak beings are actually intelligent, feeling creatures who can form bonds and contribute to society. What does that mean for us? Park Ji-ho asked. It means we've challenged one of the galaxy's most fundamental beliefs. And that's going to have consequences we can't predict. As if summoned by their conversation, Swift approached the group of adults. His vocabulary had improved dramatically and he could now form complete sentences. Dr. Kim teach Swift about humans, he said clearly. Swift want to teach humans about Valkyrie. We not just predators, we families, we feel love. We feel sad when alone. He looked directly at Commander Park Ji-ho. Humans show Galaxy that caring better than leaving behind. Maybe Galaxy learned from humans. Park Ji-ho knelt down to Swift's level. What do you remember about your people, Swift? Remember parents scared when ground shake. Remember them saying survival most important, but now Swift think they wrong. Love most important, caring most important. Kim Minji felt tears forming in her eyes. These creatures had been abandoned by their own species, but they were choosing to believe in love and compassion instead of bitterness and anger. Swift, she said gently, what do you want to happen next? Swift thought carefully before answering. Want to tell Valkyrie parents that children's still alive. Want to tell them humans show us love. Want Valkyrie learn from humans how to care for. Weak ones. Commander Park Ji-ho stood up and looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, Valkyrie parents were grieving for children they thought were dead. And somewhere else, galactic officials were deciding how to punish humanity for daring to care. But in this ship, young beings who had been left to die were learning to hope again. They were discovering that the universe could be kind, that someone would always choose to help rather than abandon. The bond between humans and Valkyrie young was growing stronger every day. And that bond was about to change the galaxy forever. The message arrived on a priority channel that made every alarm on the Sunrise sound at once. Commander Park Ji-ho rushed to the bridge where Communications Officer Shinya Ji was staring at her screen with a pale face. Sir, we're being summoned to appear before the Galactic Council Emergency Tribunal. The charges are violation of the Natural Selection Protocol, interference with predator species development, and endangering galactic security. Park Ji-ho felt his stomach drop. An emergency. Tribunal was the most serious legal proceeding in galactic law. The penalties could include anything from exile to complete destruction. When and where? He asked. Galactic Council Station Alpha in 7 days? Sir, if we're found guilty, they could ban humanity from all galactic commerce and communication. We'd be completely isolated. Dr. Kim Minji, who had come to the bridge with Swift following close behind her, spoke up. What about the Valkyrie young? What happens to them? The tribunal order says they must be returned to Valkyrie space immediately, where they will be properly disposed of according to species protocols. Swift, who had been listening carefully, stepped forward. His language skills had improved so much that he could now speak almost as clearly as a human child. What means properly disposed of? He asked. The bridge fell silent. No one wanted to answer that question. It means they want to kill us, Swift said quietly, understanding from their expressions. They want to finish what abandonment started. Sujin knelt down beside Swift. We won't let that happen. But you must follow galaxy law, Swift replied. Humans already risk much for us, cannot risk more. Park Ji-ho looked at the young Valkyrie who had become so much more than anyone expected. Swift wasn't just intelligent. He was wise, compassionate, and brave. The idea of turning him over to be killed was unthinkable. Prepare the ship for departure, Park Ji-ho ordered. We're going to that tribunal. Sir, Lieutenant Cho Yun-ji said. Carefully, are you sure that's wise? Maybe we should try to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate, Park Ji-ho replied. We saved children who were dying. If the galaxy wants to punish us for that, then we'll face the consequences. 3 days later, the Sunrise arrived at Galactic Council Station Alpha, a massive space station that served as the center of galactic government. Ships from dozens of species were docked there, and the humans could feel the tension in the air. As they prepared to disembark, Swift approached Park Ji-ho with a request that surprised everyone. Swift want to speak at tribunal, the young Valkyrie said. Want to tell Council about abandonment. Want to tell them about human kindness. Swift? That could be very dangerous, Kim Minji said. The Council might not want to hear what you have to say. Is right thing to do, Swift replied, using the phrase he had learned from the humans. Humans teach Swift that doing right thing sometimes dangerous but must do anyway. Park Ji-ho smiled despite the serious situation. You've learned our lessons. Well, Swift, the tribunal chamber was enormous, with representatives from over 50 galactic species seated in a circular arrangement. At the center stood the accused, Commander Park Ji-ho and his senior crew. But what shocked the assembled delegates was that Swift stood with them, wearing a small translation device that would broadcast his words to the entire chamber. The chief arbiter, a tall being from the Zentari Empire, read the charges in a voice that echoed through the chamber. The humans are accused of knowingly violating the natural selection protocol, endangering galactic stability and interfering with the natural order of predator species development. How do you respond to these charges? The chief arbiter asked Park. Ji-ho stepped forward. We respond that we saved children who were dying. We make no apology for that action. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several delegates looked angry, but others seemed surprised by the directness of the response. The Valkyrie representative, a massive adult Valkyrie named War Leader Thax, stood up. The humans have interfered with our species' natural selection process. Our young must prove their strength by surviving abandonment. These humans have weakened our children by providing unearned assistance. With respect, Park Ji-ho replied, we've strengthened them by providing care and education. Impossible, War Leader Thax growled. Weak offspring cannot be strengthened by softness. Swift stepped forward then, his small voice carrying clearly. Through the translation system, War Leader Thax wrong. The chamber erupted in gasps and shocked voices. No one had expected one of the young Valkyrie to speak, much less to contradict their own species' leader. The offspring speaks? The chief arbiter asked in amazement. Yes, Swift replied. Swift speak, all rescued young speak. Humans teach us words, but also teach us thoughts. Teach us that being cared for not make us weak, make us strong in different way. War Leader Thax's eyes blazed with anger. This is corruption of our nature. The humans have poisoned our young with foreign concepts. No, Swift said firmly. Humans show us what we could be. We learn from parents that survival most important. But humans teach us that caring for others also important. Maybe more important. The Altarian Federation representative leaned forward. What do you mean, young one? Swift looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of species. Before humans find us, we were dying alone in dark caves. We frightened, we hungry. We think parents abandon us because we're not good enough. His voice grew stronger as he continued. But humans risk everything to save us. Not because we strong, not because we useful, because we children who need help. Humans show us that galaxy can be kind place, not just place where strong survive and weak die. The chamber was completely silent now. Every delegate was listening intently to the small Valkyrie's words. Swift want to ask War Leader Thax question, the young creature said, looking directly at the massive adult Valkyrie. If abandoning young make them strong, why you fear humans caring for us? If we truly weak, then human kindness cannot change that. But if human kindness can change us, then maybe we not weak. Maybe we just need different kind of strength. War Leader. Thax seemed stunned by the logic of the question. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. Another adult Valkyrie in the chamber stood up. This one wore the robes of a government official. I am Council Member Vex of the Valkyrie Assembly. I wish to address the tribunal. You may speak, the chief arbiter said. War Leader Thax does not speak for all Valkyrie, Council Member Vex said. Since news of the human rescue reached our worlds, there has been great debate among our people. Many parents who lost children in the evacuation have questioned whether abandonment was truly necessary. She looked at Swift with an expression that might have been regret. Some of us have begun to wonder if our strength through abandonment tradition is actually a weakness disguised as wisdom. The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Delegates argued with each other in dozens of languages while the translation system struggled to keep up. The chief arbiter called for order. This tribunal will hear all evidence before making a decision, but I must ask, what precedent does this set? If we allow one species to violate protocols they disagree with, what prevents others from doing the same? Park Ji-ho stepped forward. Again, with respect, Chief Arbiter, the precedent we're setting is that compassion matters more than law. That caring for children matters more than politics. That sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following rules. He gestured to Swift and the image of the other young Valkyrie that Kim Min-ji had displayed on the chamber's screens. These children were abandoned to die, and we chose to save them. They've learned to speak, to think, to love. They've shown intelligence and wisdom that their own species didn't recognize. We're not asking the galaxy to change its laws for us, Park Ji-ho continued. We're asking it to change its laws for them, for all the children who might be abandoned. In the future, for all the young beings who deserve a chance to live and grow and contribute to the galaxy. The Chief Arbiter looked around the chamber at the delegates, then at Swift, then back at Park Ji-ho. This tribunal will recess for deliberation. A decision will be announced in 1 hour. As the delegates filed out to discuss the case, Swift approached Park Ji-ho. Thank you for letting Swift speak. Thank you for having the courage to speak, Park Ji-ho replied. You've given voice to every abandoned child in the galaxy, Swift nodded seriously. Humans teach Swift that speaking truth sometimes scary, but always necessary. Now they could only wait to see if the galaxy was ready to choose compassion over tradition, love over law, and caring over abandonment. The next hour would determine not just the fate of the rescued Valkyrie young, but the future of how the galaxy treated its most vulnerable members. 1 year after the tribunal, Dr. Kim Min-ji stood in the main hall of the newly established Galactic Children's Sanctuary on the peaceful world of Haven Prime. The building buzzed with activity as young beings from 8 different species played. Together, under the care of volunteers from across the galaxy. Swift, now significantly larger and even more articulate, served as her assistant and translator. He had grown into a remarkable young adult, but he still chose to spend his time helping other abandoned children rather than pursuing the warrior path traditional to his species. Dr. Kim, the new arrivals from the Zephyrian system are having trouble adjusting, Swift reported as he approached her desk. They're afraid of the older children. What do you think would help them? Kim Min-ji asked. She had learned that Swift often had better insights into frightened children than she did. Maybe if they meet others who are also abandoned? Sometimes talking to someone who understands helps more than talking to someone who just wants to help. Kim Min-ji smiled. Swift's wisdom continued to amaze her. That's an excellent idea. Why don't you organize a support group? As Swift went to work with the new arrivals, Kim Min-ji reflected on how much had changed since that day in the tribunal chamber. The Galactic Council's decision had been split almost evenly. 26 species voted to uphold the traditional natural selection protocols, while 24 voted to establish new protections for abandoned young. The tie-breaking vote had come from an unexpected source. The Valkyrie themselves, Council Member Vex, had stood before the tribunal and announced that the Valkyrie Assembly had voted to formally request the abolition of the natural selection protocol as it applied to their species. The decision had shocked everyone, including war leader Thax. The humans have shown us that our young are not weak, Council Member Vex had said. They are simply young, and young beings deserve the chance to grow, learn, and choose their own paths. The tribunal's final ruling had been a compromise that satisfied almost no one but helped almost everyone. The natural selection protocols remained in place, but any species could formally opt out of them. Additionally, any non-government organization was permitted to provide humanitarian aid to abandoned young, as long as they accepted full responsibility for their care. Humanity had immediately established the Galactic Children's Sanctuary, with Kim Min-ji as its first director. To everyone's surprise, the Valkyrie government had not only endorsed the project, but had provided significant funding and resources. Dr. Kim, called Nurse Han-Jae-woo from across the hall, we have visitors. Kim Min-ji looked up to see a group of adult Valkyrie entering the sanctuary. led by Council Member Vex, but these weren't government officials. These were parents who had lost children in the evacuation and other emergencies, one of the adult Velkari. A female named Gentleclaw approached Swift hesitantly. "Are you one of the children who was rescued by the humans?" "Yes," Swift replied. "Swift was very sick when humans found us. Almost dead. I lost 2 cubs in the evacuation," Gentleclaw sighed quietly. "The government told us it was necessary, that the strong would survive and the weak would be properly culled. Your cubs not weak," Swift said firmly. "Your cubs just need help, like all children need help." Gentleclaw's eyes filled with tears. "I have regretted that decision every day since. When I heard about what the humans did, about children like you surviving and thriving, I realized we were wrong to leave our young behind." Other Velkari parents stepped forward, sharing similar stories of loss and regret. They had come to the sanctuary not as representatives of their government, but as parents seeking to understand how to do better in the future. "We want to learn from you," another parent said to Kim Minji. "We want to learn how to care for our young the way humans do." Kim Minji felt overwhelmed by the moment. "You don't need to learn how to care. You already know how. You just need to choose caring over tradition." Swift stepped forward and addressed the Velkari parents in their own language, his words causing several to gasp in surprise. "What did you tell them?" Kim Minji asked. Swift tell them that anger at abandonment not important now. Learning to do better is important. Swift tell them that humans say what matters is not where you come from, but where you choose to go. Over the following months, the sanctuary became more than just a home for abandoned children. It became a training center where adults from various species learned new approaches to child care and protection. The Velkari parents who had visited that day became some of the most dedicated volunteers. Gentleclaw had moved to Haven Prime permanently and worked with Swift to establish support groups for parents who had lost children to abandonment protocols. "I cannot bring back my cubs," she often said, "but I can help ensure that future cubs never face the same fate." The political repercussions had been significant but mixed. Several species had severed trade relationships with humanity, calling them dangerous idealists who threatened the natural order. But others had been inspired by the human example and had begun reevaluating their own policies toward vulnerable populations. The Zenthari Empire, surprisingly, had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after their own youth began questioning traditional abandonment practices. The Altarian Federation had established their own child protection services based on the human model, but the most significant change had come from the Velkari themselves. War leader Thax had been voted out of office and replaced by council member Vex, who had instituted sweeping reforms to Velkari society. Abandonment of young was no longer considered a test of strength but a failure of community. Dr. Kim, Swift said one day as they watched a group of children from 6 different species playing together in the sanctuary's garden, "Swift want to ask question." "Of course. Do you think galaxy really changing or just some parts changing?" Kim Minji considered the question carefully. "I think change is slow, Swift. Some parts of the galaxy are learning to value compassion over tradition. Others are fighting against change. But every child we save, every parent we teach, every young being who grows up believing they deserve care and protection, that's progress." Swift nodded thoughtfully. Humans teach Swift that change starts with one person choosing to do right thing, then others see and maybe choose same thing. That's exactly right. Then Swift think galaxy will change. Maybe take long time, but will change. Because humans show that caring stronger than fear, love stronger than tradition. As if summoned by their conversation, a communication alert sounded on Kim Minji's desk. The message was from Earth, where the Global Council was announcing a new initiative, the Universal Child Protection Accord, a treaty that would extend sanctuary protections to abandoned young across all human space. 17 species had already signed on to participate, including several that had initially opposed the tribunal ruling. The movement that had started with one human ship rescuing dying children in a cave was spreading across the galaxy. Swift Kim Minji said. Would you like to help me draft a response to this message? Yes, Swift replied enthusiastically. Swift want to tell Earth about all the children here who now have hope because humans chose to care instead of abandon. As they worked together on the message, Kim Minji reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Commander. Park Ji-ho had made a simple choice: save children who needed help, regardless of the consequences. That choice had challenged the galaxy's fundamental assumptions about strength, survival, and the value of compassion. The galaxy had responded with resistance, anger, and ultimately, transformation. Not all of it, perhaps not even most of it, but enough to matter. Enough to give hope to countless young beings who might otherwise face abandonment and death. Message complete, Swift announced. Swift add note at end. Kim Minji read the final paragraph that Swift had written. The humans did not rescue us because we were strong or useful or special. They rescued us because we were children who needed help. This simple truth has changed everything for us, and we hope it will change everything for the galaxy. We are proof that caring is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. As Kim Minji sent the message, she looked around the sanctuary at the thriving young beings from across the galaxy. Each one was living proof that humanity's choice to care instead of abandon had been the right one. The galaxy might never fully embrace human values of compassion and protection for the vulnerable, but it could no longer claim that such values were impossible or worthless. These children, these survivors, these young beings who had been given a second chance at life, they were the evidence that caring could triumph over indifference, and that was enough to change the universe. One rescued child at a time. In the garden outside, the children's laughter rang across Haven Prime like a promise. The galaxy's abandoned young would never again face their trials alone. Humanity had shown the way, and others were choosing to follow. The Predator's young had not been left to die. They had been given the chance to live, to grow, to love, and to teach the galaxy that compassion could be the strongest survival trait of all.